Alright, well, hello and welcome. I'm Kodiak Broncos, and today I'm going to be bringing you my three biggest positives, but also my three biggest concerns heading into the 2025 season. But before I get into it, I just want to say a couple things. First of all, leave a like if you enjoy, subscribe if you're not already. You can always wait until the end. Also, a lot of people call me the best vocal cords in Broncos country, so now I am offering voiceovers. If you want to reach me, just contact me on Twitter at Kodiak Broncos, and then we'll figure something out. But yeah, so you can now book me for your voiceover projects, and without further ado, I'm just going to get right into my actual feature presentation. So, the biggest positive that I have from this team, when I think about the team last year, I think, a lot of what we saw during the season goes really, really forgotten about throughout the offseason. And when I think about how our games actually went last year, I think about our passing attack. And my biggest problem with our passing attack is we were explosive but not efficient when it truly mattered at key points last year. And I think that's going to be the other way around. And part of this is Bo Nix coming into his second year, and he's naturally going to be more comfortable in the Sean Payton scheme. He came into this training camp, he came into this offseason knowing that he was going to be the number one this upcoming year, unlike last year where it was a three-way competition between him, Stidham, and Wilson. But overall, I think a large part of this is Evan Ingram, Pat Bryant, RJ Harvey, J.K. Dobbins, and Trent Sherfield all being added to the offense, as well as, Troy Franklin taking that leap in his development, as well as Marvin Mims potentially taking a leap in his development as well. Therefore, I think this passing attack will be more efficient this upcoming year. And my biggest problem with our passing attack last year was I felt like we were watching Diet Russell Wilson football. I felt like it was something that was either short or deep, no in between. And while it wasn't as extreme as the Russ ball was 2-3 years ago, you can't still deny that, the team didn't have the killer instinct on the offensive side of the ball a lot of the times, especially in crucial moments. But last year we started really, really slow early. The first month of the season was an absolute tire fire passing the ball. Then midway through the season, we were absolutely on fire. But then in December, I know there was a lot of things like teams finally being able to play us and catch up to what we were doing schematically. I know that the lack of run game, the lack of over the middle of the field weapons finally did catch up to us. That seemed to be an issue in December, but I think that that's not going to be an issue this upcoming year. I think we're going to be a lot more sustained through the air. I think, for all the problems we had on the offensive side of the ball at keeping things moving last year and keeping things, on track, I think all those are going to go out the window this upcoming year. And also, we are returning all 5 starters from the best pass blocking offensive line in the league as well. You can say whatever you want about the preseason, but I'm not concerned, especially because we have a 15-game sample of the team being an elite pass protecting unit last season. Obviously the first 2 weeks were pretty rough last year, but after week 3, they really, really started to ramp up. My main concern with this team on the offensive side of the ball is that the run game might still be bad. And here's the deal. I've said this entire offseason that the bad running backs were the primary reason that the run game was bad, but I've also said they were not the only reason. I didn't like how the running backs were coached. I didn't like how Sean Payton never let anybody get the hot hand. Every week I was just like, all right, it's an estimate week. And then he would just go back to Javonte Williams. And I was just like, why? Why are we going back to Javonte Williams? He has nothing to offer. But I also didn't like how predictable we were. I thought on way too many 4th and short situations last year, we ran HB toss. I thought we used Javonte Williams way too much in those situations. And listen, with RJ Harvey and J.K. Dobbins, I can pretty much guarantee that our running back room will not be as lackluster. Without Bo Nix, our running back room would have been the second worst in the league as far as yards per carry, or our rushing offense, I should say. But, I did not like how things were drawn up at a lot of points last year. But adding J.K. Dobbins and RJ Harvey, it will help, along with, having Pat Bryant, having Evan Ingram, having Troy Franklin in the middle of the field, because defenses, they would just stack the box and dare us to run the football last year. And we couldn't make them pay, especially because we didn't have any viable tight end weapons. We had pretty poor wide receiver play in the first 8-9 weeks of the season last year. Therefore, those were all trickle-down reasons why the run game was bad. Now, they are still committed to this whole outside zone thing. They are still, working out the kinks and schematics of that as well. But, Rome wasn't built in the day, and the line is very, very committed to getting this scheme where it needs to be, but I just don't think it plays into the strengths of Powers. I don't think it plays into the strengths of Wattenberg. And yeah, that's just how I'm feeling about that. This is my main concern about the offense this upcoming year. Listen, J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey, they might be enough by themselves to make our run game good. And while I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, I'm leaning a little towards the side of pessimism when it comes to this run game truly getting better overnight. And that's how I feel. The second biggest positive I have from this team is that this defense will still tee off on some bad teams. Last year, the Broncos had an average margin of victory of 18. Now, I included week 18 from that sample because, yes, Carson Wentz had money to make. I get it. But the Chiefs were not trying that game. Let's just be completely honest. So, if you exclude week 18, which I did for the sample, we had an average margin of victory of 18, which was tied with Detroit for the best in the NFL. And a large part of that margin of victory was that our defense beat the nuts off of some teams, especially every team that we should have beat up, we did defensively. Now, Cleveland, completely different story, but that was, an all-time bad cornerback performance from Levi Wallace. And even maybe Indianapolis, but I don't know. They went 14 of 38 through the air that game, so whatever. But anybody the Broncos should have destroyed last year on defense, they absolutely did. And the only guy they lost was Cody Barton. So you're returning 10 out of 11 starters, and, I expect us, with Cam Ward, with Daniel Jones being our tune-up games, the first 2 weeks of the season, I expect us to open this year by beating those guys up. I don't know what our offense is going to look like. I'm still kind of expecting a mixed bag, especially early on, but defensively I'll be completely fine, or will be completely fine. Like I said, it remains to be seen how much better this defense actually gets, because without Dre Greenlaw, I don't know how much better the defense will actually be. I just alluded to this. I am not concerned about the defense against bad teams, but I am against good ones, okay? I think everybody can agree that the Broncos defense was really, really good last year. And, you look at what the defense was able to do against the bad teams, they handled business about as good as we could have expected them to for the expectations coming into last season. But you look at the games against the Chargers, the Ravens, the Bengals, to be completely honest, the Bills in the wildcard game, they did not take care of business against those teams. And without Drake Greenlaw, I don't know how much better the defense will actually be. Okay, last year, our lack of depth showed up at crucial points, and the inside linebacker and safety spots were sore spots against good teams. Now, we did add Talanoa Hufanga to go along with Brandon Jones, so I'm expecting that to be really, really good for our defense. And Talanoa Hufanga is in a defensive ecosystem where he can really, really thrive. And the main concern for me is, inside linebacker one, I would say, was the weakest spot on our team last year. I mean, PJ Locke too, but I'm willing to forgive him, especially because he was dealing with that spinal injury. Although PJ Locke has shown that he is not a long-term starter in the NFL. But we can deploy him in his actual role now, which is a backup safety, which he's a pretty good backup safety. But Greenlaw was the guy who I wanted the Broncos to get this past offseason, the number one guy on my free agency big board. Okay, you look at anything the 49ers fans have to say about him, they'll tell you he's like Aaron Gordon on the Nuggets or Val Nichushkin for the Avs. The team just plays so much better with him on the field. They can't explain it, but he just brings that fire that, is pretty unexplainable. But the injury news from Dre Greenlaw has mainly been negative this offseason. He had that quad pull in May or June or whatever. Then he re-aggravated it, and Sean Payton has said that they're going to be smart. They're going to be conservative, especially early on. So, I don't know how much better the defense will actually be without Dre Greenlaw. Okay, if worst case scenario, I'm not trying to say that our defense will be bad, because worst case scenario, we've seen what this defense looks like without inside linebacker play, or without good inside linebacker play. And it results in us beating the nuts off of some teams, like I alluded to in my last slide. But if Singleton has to be the inside linebacker one certain weeks, our inside linebacker group is not better that certain week than they were last year. Okay, Singleton and Strnad being the inside linebacker 1 and 2, honestly, is a downgrade from what it was last year with Barton and Strnad. Now, Strnad was not good last year against good teams, but he was against bad teams. And Cody Barton, was he a difference maker? No, but he was solid. And Alex Singleton, we haven't seen him play football in a calendar year now, so it might be a little bit of an adjustment period for him. And, the weeks where he has to be the 2, then that's perfectly fine. But, I don't know. If we are to miss Dre Greenlaw for a certain week, Jade Barron and Talanoa Hufanga being our other 2 main additions might honestly be enough to offset this. But, inside linebacker one, like I said, the team ceiling does feel a little bit capped without a good one. Now, with him, wheels up. Like, I think we can compete with any offense in the NFL. That includes Philly, who we play. That includes Cincinnati. That includes the Chiefs. So I'm not concerned about us with Greenlaw. I am concerned about us without him because, just looking at this past offseason, that's something you have to prepare for if you are inside the Denver Broncos building. Positive number 3, our coaching staff is ridiculously good. Okay, our sidelines are deep, and it goes just beyond Sean Payton and Vance Joseph. The reason I say this is because this is how good teams in the NFL, or even great teams, can get a leg up over bad ones. And also, Sean Payton is an elite adjuster. We went from being a defense 2 years ago that allowed 70 points to Miami, and then a month later, we were turning the football over, or we were taking the football away at will, I should say. But yeah, our sidelines are very, very deep, and Darren Rizzi will have our special teams top 10 in DVOA at very worst, okay? The reason our special teams coordinator got fired last year was because of how inopportunistic we were on special teams. With the free kick we gave the Chargers, with the punting disaster against the Bengals, then the thing in Kansas City that I'm not even going to mention. But Darren Rizzi is going to make special teams a strength for this team. He's one of the best special teams minds the NFL has ever seen. But going beyond just Rizzi, the positional group coaching staff is absolutely absurd. Okay, Zach Strief. Think about what he has turned the Broncos offensive line into the past 2 seasons. Think about Davis Webb and what he's been able to do. It sounds like losing John Morton was addition by subtraction for Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin. Jim Leonard, took cornerback 2 and made it a strength on this team with Riley Moss last season. He took Patrick Surtain's game to new heights, and now he has a first-round pick in Jahdae Barron to work with as well. Jamar Cain, you want to talk about the work he did? So we've had guys take steps in ways that we didn't even think were possible the past 2 years. And listen, our sidelines are deep, so this is how great teams can get a leg up over bad ones. And Sean Payton is an elite adjuster, as I had already mentioned. So our coaching staff is one of the best in the NFL, and I am not afraid to say it. I think it's genuinely a top 3 coaching staff in the NFL, just looking from top to bottom. Concern number 3, the national hype is something that this team is unfamiliar with. It seems like national analysts are 50-50 split on Denver and KC for the AFC West. I get why everybody's picking KC. There have been there, done that sort of thing. But with the team, if we do not show improvements, this is going to be really embarrassing, because a lot of this team's motivation last year was how bad they'd be and, how they'd be the worst roster in the NFL. And then they go 10-7, they surpass everybody's expectations. And Sean Payton has publicly said that he thinks this team can win the Super Bowl. So you think about that, and you think about the fact that that's something that is unfamiliar to this building the past 7, 8, 9 years, okay? We have not had anybody picking us to win the Super Bowl except for summer 2016 when a lot of people were saying, oh, this defense is still great, they could repeat, but we still had questions about the QB room. But a lot of people were just like, all right, that might not matter. And I think Sean Payton publicly said he thinks this team can win the Super Bowl, and it's not by accident, okay? This team has a very, very high ceiling, but it's if all goes well. And last year, a lot went right for us. I won't even, try to lie to you, but it shows where this team is. But once again, it's unfamiliar to the organization since summer 2016. So with Surtain winning deep boy, and that's kind of how all this began, with a lot of people saying, all right, Ingram is really going to elevate the Broncos offense to new heights. Dobbins, Harvey, Greenlaw, Hufanga, Barron. A lot of people are really playing into the fact that the Broncos could be a stacked team this upcoming year. And I don't disagree. Like, this team has a very, very high ceiling. I think, spoiler alert for my video tomorrow, I do have this team going 11-6. But once again, the national hype is very unfamiliar to this team, and it's unfamiliar to this organization. So you don't know how they're going to react to finally getting respect from the national media. But yeah, that's all I have to say about these things. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye, salute.